Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm David Moeller, represent Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt here. Next slide, please. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. To read the full notice of your rights and protections, go to www.boston_MPO.org/MPO_DISCRIMINATION. Next slide. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Others remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Stella Jordan via the chat box at sjordan@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675. Next slide, please. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Stella Jordan of the MPO staff at sjordan@ctps.org or 857-702-3675. Next slide, please. Please call the roll.
David Hung here. I will call the roll. Seat 1.
This is David Moeller. I'm here.
Seat 2.
John Bouchard, representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
Highway Division.
I do not see John Romano.
Roger, thank you. MBTA.
Morning, this is Allie Clayman representing General Manager Eng and the MBTA.
Massport.
Good morning, this is Sarah Lee representing Massport.
MAPC.
Good morning, Julia Waller's here representing Eric Rasa and MAPC.
MATA Advisory Board.
I do not see Brian Kane or Amira Patterson.
Thank you. Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins, Advisory Council here. Thank you.
Thank you. City of Boston, BTD.
City of Boston representing Mayor Wu.
City of Boston, BPDA.
Hey, Jim Fitzgerald with BPDA representing Mayor Wu and City of Boston.
City of Everett. Again, roll calling for City of Everett. Town of Arlington.
Good morning, John Alessi representing Select Board Chair Eric Helmuth in the town of Arlington.
Town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green, Town of Brookline.
Town of Acton.
Good morning, Kristen Guichard representing Select Board Chair Jim Snyder Grant for the Magic Subregion.
Metro West.
Dennis Giambetti representing Metro West and Mayor Charles Szyczki.
North Shore.
Darlene Nguyen representing Mayor Michael Cahill and the North Shore Task Force.
North Suburban Planning Council.
I heard that Melissa Gentopoulos will not be in attendance today.
Thank you. South Shore Coalition.
I do not see Chris Diorio.
Thank you. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee.
I do not see Rachel Benson at the moment.
Three Rivers Interlocal Council.
Steve Olenoff, representing the Trick Subregion, Town of Norwood.
Thank you. The roll is called. Turn it back over.
Dave, there are three people who have joined since you called the roll. Could you unmute and call on John Romano first, please?
Absolutely. MassDOT Highway Division.
John Romano here.
Thank
And
you.
we have the City of Newton and David Kozis.
David Kozis.
Yeah, we usually are called right after Everett. This is David Kozis representing Mayor Fuller and the City of Newton.
I'm just calling you in order I can see you on the screen. Jay Monty, go ahead and call on Jay, please.
Having audio issues. Can folks hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Jay Monty, City of Everett, and representing Mayor DiMaria.
Thank you so much.
You omitted to call on our
Highway Division, sorry.
Yeah.
Federal Highway Administration.
Good morning, Ken Miller, Federal Highway Administration.
Thank you, Ken. Federal Transit Administration.
Good morning, Brandon Burns with Federal Transit Administration, Region 1.
Thank you so much.
Did we miss Somerville and Tom Bent? Because he's got his hand.
Yep. You missed City of Somerville, Tom Bent, representing Mayor Ballantyne in the Inner Core.
Pardon me. Thank you so much.
That calls the roll. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is Chair's Report. I don't have one today, so we'll go directly to the Executive Director's Report. Tegan?
David, appreciate it. First, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to everybody who was able to join and participate in the annual meeting last week. I felt like it was very refreshing, a really nice event to chat with each other and to sort of talk about kind of the work that we do and why we do that work. And I hope it met your needs in terms of the interest this board had in learning a bit more about funding flows in the broader national context for MPOs. So I welcome any feedback from any of you if you have any, and also if you missed the annual meeting or if you would like to see it again, it is on our YouTube site, and hopefully, yeah, there's a link to it in the chat. So I just wanted to welcome you all to review the meeting if you'd like to. So next slide, please. So I have mentioned that we had 2 new staff members joining us in November, and I would like them now to just say a quick hello so you can see their faces and hear their voices, as I usually like to do with new employees. So I'd like to start with Jia Hong, who's a Public Engagement Coordinator with the agency. Jia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Gia, and I'm going to be joining the Communications and Engagement team. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gia. And then also we have Kyle Casiglio, who's a transportation planner in the Multimodal Planning and Design Group with a specialization in the bicycle and pedestrian transportation planning work that we do. Kyle, could you please say hello to the board and the other members of the meeting?
Good morning, everyone. My name's Kyle. I started last month and very excited to be here. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome,
Thank you
Gia.
both.
Welcome, Kyle.
Hopefully you'll be seeing more of them as the weeks go on. And then I wanted to remind folks as well, next slide, please. We have still other open positions on the careers page. So we just wanted to put the link up here on the slide and again, invite you all as board members to help us spread the word about the positions that we are trying to recruit for. Next slide, please. All right, so I wanted to highlight just in terms of engagement updates, there was an event that we had yesterday, which was very interesting. It was the Inner Core Committee Transportation Group meeting. And there was a good, robust discussion about the MBTA needs assessment and their bus priority work. And then also we talked about Somerville's Vision Zero planning work. So for more information about those meetings, past or future, please contact Logan Casey at lcasey@ctps.org. Next slide. And then we have a couple of current engagement updates. First of all, just a reminder that the applications for the TIP project funding are open through the end of this month. So if you want to take a look at that, visit the TIP development webpage, and there you can find more information and resources, including the applications and the scorecards for each of the TIP's investment programs. And if you have questions, please reach out to Ethan LaPointe. And then also we are still soliciting ideas for transportation studies and technical assistance that could be carried out in the next federal fiscal year, 2025. Right now, we're especially interested in topics related to equity, resilience, safety, and uncertainty. So if anyone has an idea, you can submit it through the study survey. And if you want to, the survey link is on the slide and we'll put it in the chat, and then also reach out to Srilekha Murthy if you would like any more information on that. Next slide. This is kind of a heads up. FHWA recently announced a new federal performance target setting requirement that states and MPOs must adopt targets on greenhouse gas emissions reductions for carbon dioxide emissions from vehicles in 4-year increments. So we will be bringing this new performance target information to you in June or July. So again, a bit of a heads up, but state targets are due in February, and then the MPO will need to establish its target within 180 days after that. Next slide. All right, today's agenda, in addition to minutes, we have a number of action items. We have 2 amendments and an adjustment related to the federal fiscal year 24 to 28 TIP. And then we'll have a number of interesting presentations. So we will have Yasha Franklin-Hodge from the city of Boston here to give a project update about Rutherford Avenue, which is an MPO target funded project. And then we will also have Lindsay Heffernan and Laura Gilmore here from the MBTA to talk about their strategic initiatives, including goals and metrics. And we will also have a summary of FHWA and FTA grant awards that have been made in the Boston region. And lastly, we'll have a presentation on a discrete study. So one of the smaller scale studies that this board approves each year. This one was in federal fiscal year, and it was called a method to evaluate flexible bus routing options. And Stephen Andrews will present that presentation. Next slide. We do expect to have a meeting, the next meeting on December 21st. We will have action items related to an amendment for the TIP. We also expect to discuss the next federal fiscal year 25 to 29 TIP project universe, and then also potentially have some presentations on other federal fiscal year 23 discrete studies that have been completed. It is possible that we will cancel the January 4th meeting, the typical sort of first Thursday of the month meeting, but please keep an eye out for our communications. We will let you know and confirm one way or the other. And with that, Mr. Chair, David, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this time? And we do have a few people, so I will call on Jim Nee first. Jim?
Thank you so much, Chairman. Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Nee, and I am the administrator for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. The MWRTA wishes to thank the Boston MPO and the CTPS staff for their work over this past year. As always, CTPS is staffed with wonderful partners and advocates. Additionally, I'd like to thank the work of the ad hoc committee on the MOU in the decision by the board to extend their mission. I look forward to meeting with that committee and eventually the full board to resolve the issue of regional transit representation, hopefully over the coming months. I just want to say thank you for your consideration and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Next, Josh Ostroff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Josh Ostroff, Director of Transportation Planning for the City of Newton. I'm just commenting briefly on something that's later on the agenda under Amendment 2 to the fiscal 24-28 TIP. Newton, along with Watertown and Arlington, have received in the past a Community Connections grant for Blue Bikes expansion. As many communities working with Lyft have experienced, we were delayed in our contract extension. So that's been concluded, and we would appreciate your favorable vote on the amendment so that we can get approval, obviously through the MPO, and then FHWA execute a new contract with Mass DOT and undertake this helpful grant to allow us to expand our Blue Bikes infrastructure for the 3 communities. Glad to answer any questions when that is considered, and I thank you so much. And I believe that John Alessi from obviously is here from Arlington, and Zeke Mermel from Watertown if there are questions from them. But we've spoken extensively about this along with folks from the MPO and Mass DOT, and appreciate your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. Brad Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo the executive director's report, the kind of ceremonial satisfaction and pride that I and we all took in last week's annual meeting. I can only imagine how hard staff had to work to make it all happen. I want to acknowledge how great it was to see everybody in the flesh and how important that kind of face-to-face hallway conversations and around the board kind of dialogue. It really was. It reminds me of how great things were a few years back. And I hope that we can bottle up that the goodwill that comes out of that annual meeting and the face-to-face contact and apply that to our regional coalition building and maintenance in the coming year. Chair, thank you to all the agency staff who came out. Particular thanks to those who traveled further than I did on the subway to get to the meeting. We recognize how much time is involved for some of our smaller sub-regions to get downtown, and yet I truly feel it was worth it. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brett. Any other comments at this time? Seeing none, if anyone from the public wants to comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next item on the agenda is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Seeing none. Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so our next meeting is going to be the 13th, this coming Wednesday. And it's going to be mostly a workshop type meeting, and so we'll be giving Sam Taylor our input on suggestions for how to update the dashboard for performance-based planning. We'll be starting our dive into the needs assessment. We call it deep dive review, but essentially we want to get a better sense of the needs assessment as we look forward to the next LRTP. And we'll also be thinking about ideas for the discrete studies for the UPWP, as the executive director Tagan mentioned a few minutes ago. And also, I will probably rave about the travel demand model when I give my update, because I met with the steering committee. I'm actually part of the steering committee, and we met yesterday, and it's really coming along very nicely. We did some, Marty showed us some exploratory modeling results, and they're fascinating. And I just want to express my appreciation to Marty, again, especially his patience with me. I gave him a pretty long list of questions, and he was very encouraging in asking me to work with, encouraging and offering to work with me to have a better understanding of the model. So he does great work, and he is really a joy to work with. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions for Lynn? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is an action item to approve the October 19th minutes. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, and I'll motion to approve the minutes.
John Alessi.
John Alessi, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Chairperson David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Allie Kleeman,
Allie Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Julie Wallers,
Julie Wallers, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Gishard,
Kristen Gouchard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen.
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Have I, Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Have I missed anyone? 18 votes and the motion passes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an action item on federal fiscal year 2024-28 tip amendment number 1. Ethan LaPointe. Ethan? Say again. Is Ethan here?
I hope so. Let me see if we can track it down.
Sorry, I was having some audio troubles.
Okay, no worries. Thanks,
Good,
Ethan.
okay. My apologies. All right, so
No
again,
worries at all.
good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO. This presentation is the first of 3 presentations for amendments and adjustments to the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP. If we can go on to the next slide, this is a request for an endorsement of federal fiscal year 24 to 28 Amendment 1. As a refresher, this amendment included the programming of Boston's federal fiscal year 2022 Safe Streets and Roads for All implementation grant project, the reprogramming of 3 Border to Boston trail design earmarks for Salem, Peabody, and Marblehead, a cost increase for 1 statewide highway project, and the addition of 3 projects from the federal fiscal years 2023 to 27 statewide transportation improvement program into the federal fiscal years 24-28 regional transportation improvement program for project readiness purposes. And as some may recall here, each of those statewide projects were fully contained within the limits of the Boston region, which is why they are now being reflected in the regional TIP. If we can go on to the next slide, I would like to provide an update on one item that has had a small adjustment added to it between when Amendment 1 was released for public comment and the endorsement here today. This is for Lynn's intersection improvements at 2 intersections on Broadway project. Under Amendment 1 initially, when this was released, this project was shifted back in order to be delayed out of federal fiscal year 23 into 2024 to account for its new advertisement date of December 30th. At that time, there had not been a cost increase incorporated into the project, but here there is a less than $500,000 cost increase for this project's budget to increase it to $6 million. I'm sorry, $6,491,000 to reflect the disposal of some work materials on site, namely related to fill and other soils in the project area. With that, if we can move on to the next slide, within that public comment period, it began on October 23rd and concluded November 13th. There were no public comments received for any of the projects in Amendment 1. With that, if we can move on to the next slide, staff are requesting that the board votes to endorse Amendment 1, including that new project cost change for the federal fiscal years 24 to 28 TIP.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions for Ethan? Seeing and hearing none, can I get a motion and a second to adopt the amendment as presented today? Please state your name for the record. Wait, Ken Miller, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the cost, it's showing the cost of the Boston Safe Streets and Roads grant as $9 million. It's actually, that's only the federal portion. There is a match. You should be, I think, should be showing the total cost.
Ethan?
I can look into what was uploaded into our eStip manager system and then reflect that accordingly once I confer with folks at OTP on that.
Well, that's what it is, and so I'm just looking at the table that was on.
Yeah. I need a motion to adopt the amendments presented today, including the reflection of a match that will be provided by the City of Boston for their implementation grant. Can I get a motion in a second, please? And please state your name for the record. Lynn Diggins.
You made it a challenging motion, Mr. Chair, but I motion to adopt the amendment and the changes that will occur after review of necessary materials. Is that close enough, Mr. Chair?
That is close enough. Jen
Okay,
Ruff.
thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded, please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ali Clayman,
Ali Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Julia Wallers,
Julia Wallers, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
The motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is another action item. This one is for the 2024 to 2028 TIP Amendment number 2. Ethan Lapointe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So moving on to the second change for the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP. Amendment 2 to the TIP proposes changes to the federal fiscal years 24, 5, and 6 programs, including the reprogramming of earmarks to design projects in communities of Brookline, Dover, and Needham, and a new earmark project for the town of Arlington, the removal of federal fiscal year 2024 funding for a microtransit project in the MPO's Community Connections program for the Cape Ann Transportation Authority's on-demand service expansion, some scheduling changes for other Cape Ann Transportation Authority projects to accommodate some delays in the procurement for some of their trolley vehicles, new funding for a Blue Bikes project that is located in Arlington, Newnan, and Watertown that was programmed in a previous TIP, the federal fiscal years 2022 to 26 TIP, and also adjustments to the set-aside allocations for the Community Connections program in federal fiscal years 2025 and 2026. If we can move on off of this slide, I will also preface this amendment by starting off that the table that was posted onto the calendar for this indicated the inclusion of some MassDOT highway projects. There are no MassDOT highway projects included in Amendment 2 or Adjustment 1 following this one, contrary to what that table may have indicated. Those will come at future changes. So if we can start off, though, with these member designated projects and move on to the next slide. The first of these projects is the new one. This is for Arlington, the Mystic River Path to Minuteman Bikeway Connection Design Project. This is a new project funded at $1 million in the federal earmark with $250,000 in local match there to provide for a link between the Alewife Brook Greenway, the Mystic River Path, and Minuteman Bikeway in Arlington Center. The next two projects were previously programmed in the federal fiscal years 23 to 27 TIPs in federal fiscal year 23, however, could not be executed in time before the end of the federal fiscal year. These are the Beacon Street Bridle Path Design Earmark for Brookline and Dover and Needham Center Street and Central Avenue Bridge Design Earmarks as well, in the amount of $2.5 million each there. If we can move on to the next slide, this will then take us into the separate transit program adjustments for federal fiscal years 24 and 5 for the Cape Ann Transportation Authority, and onto the next slide, please. So starting off, for the Cape Ann Transportation Authority, the main change that is driving all of these other items here is the replacement of two replica trolley projects. Now, this project was actually amended onto the federal fiscal years 23-27 TIP as well in fiscal year 23, I believe under Amendment 3 of that TIP, but the vehicles could not be procured in the year that it was programmed. It was formerly under project ID T00072. For those who may want to reference that, with the programmed amount being for $1.28 million. With the delay of this project, the Cape Ann Transportation Authority is reallocating its apportionments of its RTA capital funding to match this new year of funding in federal fiscal year 2024. As a result, its repavement of the Administration Operations Facility parking lot has had its budget reduced and eliminated from federal fiscal year 24 into 2025 to accommodate that, and 1 year of funding for the rehabilitation of the Administration and Operations Facility has also been omitted. However, funding for each subsequent year of that specific project for federal fiscal years 25 through 28 still remains. If we can move on to the next slide, we also have a reflection of that change. For the repavement and delay of the Administrations and Operations Facility parking lot. reflected here in the federal fiscal year 2025 transit program. And if we can move on to the next slide, this then takes us into the next major item for this amendment, being changes to the MPO's Community Connections program for federal fiscal year 2024, continuing with a CADA microtransit project. So in the case of this project, the project proponent here was not able to advance the project that they applied for, which was originally adopted in the federal fiscal years 2023 to 27 TIP. The project that was adopted was for service expansion of an existing microtransit service into the Lanesville neighborhood of Gloucester and also into the adjacent community of Rockport. The project did not execute in federal fiscal year 2023, and the applicant has also indicated, the Cape Ann Transportation Authority to be specific, that they cannot execute the project in federal fiscal year 2024 either. Therefore, the funding that has been programmed for federal fiscal year 2024 is being taken off of the project. This project is still funded in that third year, federal fiscal year 25, pending further discussions with the project proponent to see if it is something they would still wish to advance before making any changes there. If we can move on to the next slide, we also have an additional change that will not only utilize some of this funding, but also impact some of the items that will appear in Adjustment 1. This is the reintroduction of a project from the federal fiscal years 2022 to 26 TIP. This is a Blue Bikes expansion project for Arlington, Newton, and Watertown, which is being reprogrammed, or I should say, requested for reprogramming in federal fiscal year 2024, given that the contract not only did not execute in federal fiscal year 22, but even with a contract extension into 2023, could also not move forward there either. If we move on to the next slide, I actually have some more detail on this project to refresh board members as to what the substance that was applied for here was, given that this project is asking effectively for a new round of funding. This is a joint application by the communities of Arlington, Newton, and Watertown for that Blue Bikes expansion work. The original scope was planned for 9 different locations. Given that it was programmed in the federal fiscal years 22 to 26 TIP, it was still using pilot scoring criteria for the Community Connections program, so its score of 52 points isn't necessarily comparable to what we currently have in the program, but I wanted to add it here just to give that context. And the cost estimate request of $340,000 is identical to what was programmed in federal fiscal year 2022. With that, if we move on to the next slide, I would then also like to request a change here with regard to the federal fiscal year 25 and 26 community connections set-asides. Now, as some board members may recall here, when it comes to how the community connections program is allocated within the transportation improvement program, the first year of the TIP programs new projects against a set-aside amount of funding for any applications that come in during that TIP cycle. So in this case, generally speaking, there's $2.5 million initially set aside to support community connections. For the microtransit projects that are funded across 3 years, some of those projects count against that balance in advance, which is why the set aside for the federal fiscal year's 2025 community connections program is would change from the $942,804 currently in it down to $909,679. This is a net decrease in available funding to fund new community connections projects in the ongoing application round of $33,125. You'll also see that in federal fiscal year 2026, which is the next cycle's community connection round, there is $2,392,023 in that program. The reason why this is much greater than the federal fiscal year 2025 program is because the amount of microtransit shuttles, pilot shuttles that are currently operating in the Boston region is going to wane heavily after federal fiscal year 25. There is only one microtransit pilot project that is anticipated to be operating in 2026, which is the Metro West RTA's Catch Connect Phase 2 project for extended service hours in Framingham and Natick. The net change of these adjustments in federal fiscal year 26 is a reduction by $54,523 down to $2,337,500 for next year's community connection cycle. So that number is still subject to change pending the results of this year's development there. If we can move on to the next slide, MPO staff are requesting that the board votes to release Amendment 2 for a 21-day public comment period, the comment for which would commence December 11th next week and conclude January 1st of the new year. So with that, happy to open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions for Ethan? Ken Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about the three earmark, the programming of the three earmarks. John, I get is John Broussard on. I guess the intent for MassDOT to use the funds to do the design, or is it the intent to contract with the communities to have them hire the consultant to do the design? I think it's probably the latter. Is that correct?
Yes.
Be happy to answer, David. I've been coordinating with the three communities for them to solicit and hire the designer and then work through a MassDOT agreement through Federal Highway through us to them on the design.
Okay, right. Okay, and I know you've been working with Ken Colello, is that right, John?
I've been working with Ken on a few other things. These I've been working directly with Brookline, Dover, and with Arlington, those three.
Okay, just a reminder that, federal funded consultant procurement, we do have to, if you can, John, if you can just let me know who the project managers for each of these, your project managers for each of these contracts, that would be great. And then also, just remind folks that we have to approve the scope, but we also want to approve the contract to make sure that, all the good federal stuff is in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to release this for a 21-day public review process? Please state your name for the record. Lynn Diggins.
Neither one. So, this is Lynn Diggins from Budget Council. I make a motion to release this amendment for public review.
Thank you. Jen Rowe.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ali Clayman,
Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Julia Wallers,
Julia Wallers, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kosis,
David Kosis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti, Dennis Giambetti, Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Steve Aldenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
The motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Dennis Trimby. I had trouble with my unmuting. I like to be recorded as yes.
Without
Recording.
objection, please record Dennis as yes. Next item on the
Acknowledged. Thank you.
agenda is action item 424 to 28, tip adjustment number 1, Logan Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. My name is Logan Casey. I'm the Capital Programming Planner with the Boston Region MPO. I assist Ethan with the development of the tip, and today I'm going to walk through the federal fiscal year 24 through 28 tip adjustment 1. If you could go to the next slide. The next slide, please. All right, so the adjustment 1 summary for the federal fiscal year 24 program, adjustment 1 proposes reprogramming of matching funds for MassDOT's Community Transit Grant Program, cost adjustments for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority's Catch Connect Microtransit Expansion Phase 2, and some minor cost adjustments for 2 blue bike expansion projects, as well as minor cost adjustments and some proposed scope changes for 3 bicycle projects that were funded in federal fiscal year 24. As a reminder for the board, since this is our first adjustment of the year, adjustments classify as less as not needing public comment because they're smaller, mostly administrative cost adjustments. So they will not need a public comment period like an amendment would. And each of these changes are less than $500,000. So they're below the threshold needed for an amendment. If you go on to the next slide, we can go through some of the details. So starting with the community transit grant match. There are a total of 5 projects having their match funding being reprogrammed. This match funding was originally programmed in the federal fiscal year 23 through 27 TIP, although the projects didn't execute during that TIP, so now they need to move forward in order to have that matching funding used for these projects. So these 3 projects will have a cost adjustment of $10,422. And then if you go on to the next slide, with a similar reasoning, these 2 projects will also be reprogrammed from the 23 through 27 TIP to the 24 through the 28 TIP, as they were not able to execute on time. And these matching funds for the Cato replacement van project is $199,107, and the MWRTA replacement item is $63,600. And then moving on to some of our community connections adjustments. You go to the next slide, thank you. So the first one is our Metro West Regional Transit Authority Catch Connect Microtransit Expansion Phase 2. This project was originally programmed in our 24 through 28 TIP, neglecting to reflect the regional or the local match that would be provided to properly fund this project. So through all 3 fiscal years of this project, the funding has to be adjusted to reflect that accurate local match. So in federal fiscal year 24, that match is $35,000. In federal fiscal year 25, the increase is $33,125. And in federal fiscal year 26, the increase is $32,500. If we go on to the next slide, we'll also talk about some of the bike share changes as well too. So firstly, our Medford Blue Bikes expansion. This one received a cost increase to account for a revised quote from Lyft for the purchase of the bicycles, as well as to account for the administrative changes to accurately reflect the local match provided for this project. And the difference for this project is going to be $40,457. And then next is the Cambridge Electric Blue Bikes adoption project. This one actually experienced a cost decrease, but again, this was due to the updated scope and cost procurement from Lyft, as well as revised for accurately reflecting that local match. And that cost increase is going to go down to $37,575. If we go on to the next slide. And then finally, we'll talk through just a couple of the bicycle parking projects as well too. So again, these 3 projects saw minor cost increases to account for the local match, as well as some slight scope changes. So starting with the Medford Bicycle Parking Project, this project received a cost estimate increase to account for the local match. So that, and the most recent quote as well too. So this difference was $8,240. Secondly, the Canton Public Schools Bike Rack Program. This had an administrative change to accurately account for the local match, but this will have also a change in scope to admit the Gavin Middle School due to upcoming renovations. The bicycle racks for the other 3 elementary schools and the high schools will continue to be installed as part of this project. This project saw a cost increase of $5,625. And then finally, the Canton Public Library bicycle racks, formerly known as the Canton Center Bicycle Rack Project. experienced a cost increase and a scope change of $2,500. And this scope change was because the bike rack project did not have the right-of-way permissions at Canton Center Station, the T station, to install the bike racks. So it'll be moving a block down, still in Canton Center, to the public library, where the bike racks will be installed there. So that is all for the adjustments. If you can go on to the next slide. Again, to give you just a reminder on adjustment 1, since this is an adjustment and less intense than an amendment, the board would not have to put this out for a public comment period. So at this time, the MPO staff would request the board vote to endorse adjustment 1. And I'm happy to
Logan. Any questions for Logan? Seeing and hearing none, can I get a motion and a second to adopt this adjustment as presented today? And please state your name for the record. David Kozis.
David Kozis from Newton, making the motion to endorse adjustment 1.
Lynn Diggins.
I'll second it and say that I like the way the accounting was handled in the difference column. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman, Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Julia Wallers,
Julia Wallers, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Steve Allenoff.
Steve Allenoff, yes.
With that, the motion passes. Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Next item on the agenda is an update from the city of Boston on Rutherford Avenue. Yasha Franklin Hodge, whenever you're ready.
Hi, folks. Let me just get my camera. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here. Yasha Franklin Hodge, Chief of Streets for the city of Boston. And of course, I'm joined by my excellent colleagues, Jim Fitzgerald and Jen Rowe, who have been on throughout. Let me just share my screen. I've been asked to provide just kind of a quick update on where we are with our Rutherford Ave Sullivan Square project. And kind of what we see as the timeline going forward. This has obviously been a project that has existed in some form or another for many, many years, but we are committed to moving it forward to actually constructing it. We're appreciative of all of the support that the MPO has lined up for this project, and we will make use of that support in the years ahead. And so I just want to walk through what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and what we think the timeline is for getting this work done. So to start with, just a quick overview of the context. Sullivan Square is, as I think all of us know, a key regional intersection. In particular, it is critical for transit with the Orange Line station there, as well as being the a meeting point for multiple key bus corridors. This is particularly important in the context of bus network redesign that's going to introduce 3 new high-frequency routes with high-frequency service that will traverse the area and either on Rutherford or through Sullivan Square. You can see the list in the map here of those new high-frequency routes. But one of the things that we have heard repeatedly from the T is that for these routes to work, many of these are quite long. And for them to work well, we need to have significant bus priority added along the routes. And so that, as we'll get to in a sec, is one of the key things that we are trying to achieve with this project. This is also a critical location and corridor for bike connectivity. MassDOT is advancing a project to build a pedestrian bike bridge over the Mystic River from Encore to Assembly Row. The Draw 7 Bridge trail extension has been completed, going down to Alfred Street, and the connecting cities, Everett, Somerville, Cambridge, have all been investing in bike infrastructure that feeds into this area. To the south, the city is close to, well, the city with the help of MassDOT is close to completing the new North Washington Street Bridge that will also incorporate high quality bike facilities connecting into Boston. But if any of you have ever tried to bike on Rutherford Ave, you will know that this is a big missing link in this network. But we hope that with this project, this will allow for true regional connectivity by bike safely off the street from the surrounding region. So goals that we have for this project, we'll talk a little bit about the regional pieces, but many of these are, very much focused on the Charlestown community. We have a neighborhood that right now is cut off by Rutherford Ave from the train station and from access sort of across or under the freeway. We have quite a bit of development on tap for the Rutherford Ave corridor, particularly the western side of Rutherford Ave. Through the city's plan Charlestown, we anticipate many thousands of units of housing, millions of square feet of development happening here, and we know that there's going to be strong demand for connectivity between this new expansion of the neighborhood and the traditional part, particularly for pedestrians. We have a real lack of open space in parts of Charlestown and an opportunity to create a linear park running along Rutherford Ave, as well as additional parks in Sullivan Square that will help serve the Charlestown community. And we know that we need to make sure that any changes we make on Rutherford, which affect roadway capacity, are not do not result in an increase in cut-through traffic. So we're sort of working to incorporate that planning for that as a adjacent project. Lastly, Rutherford and Sullivan is just a sea of asphalt and concrete. So there is an opportunity here to expand the tree canopy to incorporate more green infrastructure to help deal with stormwater. We also have some critical flood pathways at the north of this project area towards Sullivan Square. And while there's other work being done right along the waterfront to help close some of those flood pathways, we want to make sure that we are planning this project with an eye towards the resiliency challenges in the general vicinity and incorporating thoughtful design to ensure that climate change does not ruin our beautiful new roadway. So we are, in order to kind of meet these project goals and to reflect our overall goals around mode shift and how we grow in a sustainable way, we are moving ahead with a all-surface design for this corridor, both at the Sullivan Square intersection and along Rutherford Ave. This will involve the removal of the underpasses that are there today and a reconfiguration of these roads to be less highway and more high capacity boulevards that can move people both by car, but also that provide transit priority. So there will be, as key features of this, center running bus lanes with 2 general traffic lanes. We'll have safe and comfortable bike facilities throughout, allowing all movements along and through this project area to happen safely and to make the critical connections that we talked about earlier. We were working with the community to make some changes to resident permit parking to address some development-related concerns they have associated with that. And of course, we have a couple of key public facilities in the vicinity, the MBTA maintenance facility and the Ryan Playground, which is about to be renovated by the City of Boston Parks Department, which we will coordinate with in the design of this. We have a concept design. This is still a draft, but we expect to be reaching 25% early next year based on this concept, and I'll talk about the schedule in just a moment. The last thing I want to say in the context of this project, right, is this is a regional project, right? So, and we know that this region is changing a lot. Plan Charlestown, which is our plan, particularly focusing on the Rutherford Ave corridor and the Charlestown waterfront to the north of Medford Street envisions a great deal of growth. That growth and our planned road design has been factored into Plan Charlestown. We've also incorporated the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group modeling for future growth in the greater Sullivan Square region, looking at Lower Broadway and Everett, looking at Interbelt, looking at the whole sort of surrounding area where we anticipate a lot of additional square footage. So that has been incorporated into our modeling for this project. I want to say one more thing on the regional story here, right? Which is that we are at I think, a crossroads and a moment where we have to make a choice, because if you look at the combined development potential in Boston and in the immediately surrounding communities, this area centered on Sullivan Square, but radiating out from there, is probably the largest single development opportunity that exists in Boston right now by acreage. There is a tremendous amount of change that is on tap and potentially can happen over the next several decades as these adjacent areas are shifted from their historic industrial uses to new, denser, commercial and residential development. And if we build a roadway here or rebuild a roadway here that is focused on automobile-centric mobility, it will shape how these developments take place. It will lead us towards a path of building more parking, building more space for moving more motor vehicles in an area that we know even today with its highway-like configuration can become very congested. And so we are looking at this project both through the lens of how do we design it to accommodate the vehicular travel that we know is happening now and which will to a degree continue to happen into the future, but also how do we incorporate transit priority? How do we incorporate bikes in a way that can actually provide an alternative for the development that we see on the horizon? How can we, working with our partners in Everett, ensure that Lower Broadway has the kind of high quality center running bus rapid transit that will be necessary to build the densities that the city of Everett anticipates there and serve those people with good transit connections? How do we ensure that Rutherford Ave can have those millions of square feet without having half of that be built as parking lots that just add to congestion in our neighborhoods? So this project design is really centered around a different vision, not only for Boston, but for the regional development and making sure that we are building a road that can deliver a more multimodal future for the region. Here's the money. This represents current funding and the timing schedule associated with that. I won't go through this in detail, but happy to go back and talk about any of this. Again, very appreciative of the MPO's support for this project. And here's the timeline. So we are finalizing our concept design and then we'll be working, we should have this finalized by February. We do have a desire to do some early action projects in the area. So we'll be working over the next couple of years to identify and implement those. But most importantly, we will be working to complete the design to go from 25% to 100% to be ready for construction by spring of 2027. Understanding that there are a number of things that have to happen beyond just engineering, including environmental review and permitting, securing right-of-way, but which we have developed a project schedule to do these things in parallel with some of the design work. And that is the end of my slides, and happy with the help of my colleagues to answer any questions.
Thank you, Yasha. Questions for Yasha? Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Yasha. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So could you just quickly tell us about the resilience, especially with respect to flooding?
I may call on Jim to see if he has anything to add, but so my understanding of the primary well, there's two issues here. There is a stormwater issue here, right, which is an issue everywhere. And when we design new streets or redesign streets, we are working to incorporate green infrastructure as a core part of all of our street designs to reduce the burden on our traditional stormwater management system. We expect more frequent, more intense storms. And so trying to make sure that we're absorbing and infiltrating as much of that water as we can on site will help with more resilient streets. There is a critical flood pathway to the north here. You can see kind of where this teal arrow is that says open space connections. There's work being done at the Ryan Playground to help increase the resiliency there. And I believe that there are a number of development projects right along the Mystic River, along the waterfront here that will be adding resiliency features to address storm surge and kind of the coastal flooding risk side of this. Jim, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's spot on. I think the main point of inundation is where you see that kind of gray area south of Ryan Playground, which is the Schraff Center properties and parking lot. And there's currently a development proposal a little bit south of there that the same property owners own that would build resiliency elements along the Mystic River, and as well as the park resiliency efforts that we're working on as well. So the main low point and inundation point is proposed to get addressed through those redevelopment projects.
Great. And a comment and then one suggestion. The comment is I really like the center lane transit or the center lanes for buses. And the suggestion, and you probably have thought about this already, is when you do make it hard for vehicles to cut through, please try and make it possible for bikes and pedestrians through, because we see areas in Arlington where it's very clear that people designed it to not have cut throughs for cars, but now pedestrians and cyclists can't get through, and they're saying like, who designed this? So that's just my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Len. Julia Wallers.
Hi, thank you, Yasha, for this excellent presentation. It's beyond exciting to see the surface plan resurfaced. I think everyone knows this has been such a long time coming, this project back and forth over the last decade, almost 2 decades. So thank you for that. Couple of questions, and maybe you covered this a little bit, but how this is obviously catalytic and transformative in terms of how it impacts projects like the Silver Line extension, everything happening on the Everett side of the corridor. What's the coordination been between the city and Mass DOT regarding the Silver Line, and then also Encore Casino's plans to expand, and they are really wanting to plan around transit, but is it happening? Is it not? I know they've previously invested in Rutherford and not seen the results, and I think this would give them a good sense of confidence that things are moving forward and encourage them to continue investing in bus rapid transit that truly moves people in a dignified, even glitzy way to get to the casino. So those are 2 sort of separate questions.
Yeah, those are great questions. So we've certainly been talking with MBTA about bus service and Silver Line extension possibilities. There's still I think a process underway at the MBTA around defining what Silver Line extension would look like, both in a short to medium term, but also in a long term. This corridor, as conceived, would certainly serve any version of Silver Line extension that comes down Broadway and over the bridge into Sullivan Square, or one that continues, towards the south and either into Boston at some point in the future, or even into Cambridge over the Gilmore. There is, though, as noted, service that would be made that would take advantage of this infrastructure just under the existing bus network redesign. So, we are very excited about the new service that's been discussed, the T101 that would take folks into Kendall Square along this corridor. That is, frankly, something that will be hugely beneficial to the residents of Charlestown to have that connection, in addition to the regional benefit that that has. I think one of the challenges we've had, with all respect for the MBTA and the kind of, the scope of work they have ahead of them of all kinds right now, it is difficult for the MBTA to, and for good reason, to sort of make service commitments or do planning more than a few years out for, what kinds of new services might exist. And so when we think about a design for this project, we're thinking 50 years in the future, what kind of transportation needs to exist. We can't reasonably ask the T to tell us what kind of service they can operate 50 years in the future, or how growth will shape their demand for services. So we are trying to build a corridor that says fundamentally, this will be a place where not only will the service that is planned today be able to operate in a high quality, even glitzy way, but that it will be accommodating for the future of this conversation in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, about what new services need to be added, that we're creating that space and that capacity now for those future conversations. In terms of the casino, I don't know that we've had a lot of direct conversations with them about the sort of the bus piece of the Sullivan Square project, other than to inform them that this is the direction that we're headed. I think it's a good flag that we should probably re-engage them on that. Certainly the city has taken a position that expansion of the casino that relies on adding thousands of parking spaces is a bad idea. And that frankly, even the roads that we have today are not designed to accommodate that additional traffic over the Alfred Street Bridge. So we will always continue to advocate for multimodal growth at the casino and whatever else might be built across the street from there in the future.
Yeah, definitely good to check in. They just submitted their next application. I can connect with you offline about that. But yeah, this would be great for them to see.
Yeah.
David Kozis.
Thank you. And maybe this is a side issue really for the MPO, but I'm always interested in resident permit programs. It's something we deal with pretty much every week. And I don't want to take any time on it, but I would just ask, do you know where I would look to find out more information, about your approach to, changes to the system, in this neighborhood?
Yeah, you should take a look at Plan Charlestown. The 15-second version of it is that we are essentially walling off the traditional neighborhood in their own permit parking zone, and ensuring that any new growth is not, the people who are moving into those new growth areas are not permitted to park in the traditional neighborhood, but will have their own separate zones to handle any permanent on-street parking.
Very good. Thanks for that.
Ken Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Yasha. This has been very informative. Just a couple of questions. One, you mentioned you're going to be thinking about starting 25% design. We just encourage you to talk about NEPA and initiating the NEPA process as soon as possible. Now is the time, I think. So I would encourage you to talk to MassDOT about what appropriate place of action might be and what's associated with that. And then related to that, years ago, there was the previous studies and the issue of whether it be a at grade or the underpass or modified underpass, I think was the sort of years ago was sort of the selected alternative, and now this is sort of been a bit of a change. So I was just wondering if you could talk about what the public process has been, or what you envision the public process is moving forward, and if there's any documentation, because very often what happens, and it's happened, I don't have to remind you about Melnia Cast and some other projects, but we get the study moves forward, and then people will not feel that they weren't consulted, whether they were or not, but there may be feelings that they weren't. So I think maybe we'd be happy to talk to you about NEPA and the public process moving forward. So just something to keep in mind. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great point. So yes, on the environmental permitting, our timeline does have us starting that, more or less contemporaneous with the finalization of the concept design. So we will connect with you and with offline of this to kind of talk through the details of that schedule. But our consultants have mapped out some plans for kind of what the sequencing would be and the time we need for that. In terms of public process, I mean, the overwhelming message that we have gotten from the community is just do something already. We have been having public process on this project going back to the early 2000s. And I think there's a sort of broad recognition that the corridor as it exists today is not serving the community well, and there's a need for change. Fundamentally, right, we see strong points of view on both in favor and opposed to a surface option. And one of the things that we have, learned as part of our work in a situation like this is we need to do the work to listen, to understand the differing perspectives. There comes a decision point, and we have passed that decision point now where we need to make a fundamental choice about the different the kind of the big question of design. Is this surface or not? Is this what's the sort of modal balance here? And that comes from that extended community conversation that we have had. We have made that choice. We've shared that with the community in conversations over the last year and a half, as well as through the Plan Charlestown process. When we have our concept finalized, we will be taking that back out to the community for input and feedback. But I think along with that is sort of saying, these are the things we have decided, and these are the things that are not decided, right? There's a lot about, the specifics of the corridor, the crossings, the linear park, the options that exist for how Sullivan Square is arranged, that we'll have some opportunity for change and refinement based on community input. But we anticipate being very clear when we go into those conversations that the surface decision has been made. And, we'll certainly reflect back, and as we have been doing, the reasoning behind that. So I think, we sort of see this as an exercise of continued dialogue, but also narrowing of the scope of potential change as we move through that process. And we are very confident, based on the conversations we have been having with community members and elected officials, that we will have a pathway towards finalizing this all-surface design on the schedule that we've laid out. But we're happy to share more about the engagement plan with you as well.
No, yeah, no, that would be great, and thank you. And I think you touched on it the last point. One of the last things you said, that this was supported by analysis, and so I think that moving forward, making a selection of in effect, a preferred alternative should be based on evaluation, and that evaluation and analysis, should be part of the public process. And so, I think it would be helpful to just show people, the reasoning and the analysis behind any decisions that, that are being made. So, and again, it's not just it's like you said, it's not just a Charlestown problem; it's a regional issue. So, we also need to evaluate the effects on the region, the regional system too. So. Thank you very much.
Other questions for Yasha? Yasha, I just have one. When do you expect you'll have an updated cost estimate?
I do not know the answer to that question. Jim, do you happen to know that off the top of your head?
I think when we get into actually preparing the 25% design is when we'll be able to know more with these kind of big decisions about the design concept. And then that's the intention as part of that preparation.
Okay, thanks guys. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. Next item on our agenda is the MBTA. Thank you, Yasha. The MBTA and their strategic planning initiative. Lindsay Heffernan, whenever you're ready.
Good morning.
I'm gonna turn it over to Laura, David. She's got this all down.
All right, Laura, whenever you're ready.
Thanks all.
No problem. And can I just confirm you all have our slides? Are you controlling the deck for this? All right, excellent. Good morning. My name is Laura Gilmore. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Transit Planning at the MBTA. And as just introduced, I am joined today by Lindsay Heffernan, who is our Assistant General Manager for Policy and Strategic Planning. And we are very excited to be talking to you all today about some of our work on our strategic planning to define goals and metrics for the MBTA. You can go to the next slide. We want to start this presentation with a question that we often get, which is, why does the team need to set goals? And why did we do that now this year? So with new leadership starting this year and a new administration, we felt that we had a unique opportunity to set the direction for the agency and for our staff. Clear goals help our staff day to day to make sure we're aligning our decision making and that every decision is made in an aligned way amid constrained resources that we face. So through alignment with our agency's mission, vision, and our values, along with the new goals and metrics, which we'll be sharing with you today, we feel that we will be better equipped to measure our success and to determine where we need to have course corrections using data-driven analytics. Our strategic planning process to set out our goals and metrics will enable us to do some better planning, to better create a clear roadmap based on for how to prioritize amongst different projects, to clarify and articulate multimodal priorities that are aligned to our agency values, and to consider the human and monetary capital costs and the trade-offs of our decision making. We are also using these goals to empower our staff internally to better create project and team-based strategies and plans that help us achieve the objectives we have set that are based on Governor Healy's administration, the Secretary, our board, and the General Manager's priorities. And finally, we'll talk about this more today as something you all will be interested in. We are also using this strategic planning work to set up a forum for public engagement in some of our required planning activities, including the program for mass transportation, which is run through our partners at MassDOT in the Office of Transportation Planning, and our CIP. So if you can go to the next slide. So we want to stress that our strategic planning work is about planning as a process, as a verb. And today we're going to be sharing our goals, our high-level metrics to track success, and some initial actions that we are taking to achieve the goals. But we want you to know that we are going to be continuing to work on and to refine our planning over time. And we've set up a framework here where we are somewhere between aligning our team internally and conducting a gap analysis. So we know that we have some more work to do to analyze our gaps, to engage stakeholders in strategy development and additional planning for projects, because our planning was about setting the high-level goals, not about defining what the individual projects are, and to implement our goals. Next slide. So before we get to the goals themselves, I just want to tell you a little bit about our planning process, because the planning that we have done was guided by extensive work that the MBTA is already doing day to day and by our staff's input on what the future of the T should look like. We began our process internally with the staff, with the people who know the system best, who are our employees. And part of the reason for that is that we are focusing on our agency culture, and part of changing our culture is listening to our staff. But we also grounded our work in existing plans for the T. So our team and our consultants reviewed more than 35 publicly available plans for the T to look at in the areas of safety, service, equity, sustainability, and culture. And that work focused on looking at what project goals we already have and what was already asked of the T. And then we structured an intentional process to engage a number of our staff. We engaged more than 150 staff in a process, including subject matter experts, frontline staff, and leaders of the agency who helped us to guide our process. And we emerged with our agency-wide goals, which we're going to share with you, a set of high-level metrics to track our progress, and some updates to our values. Next slide. So What you see on this slide is a summary of our agency mission, vision, and our values. And we want to be clear that we did not change our agency mission. That has not changed, but we did take this opportunity to update some of our value statements to better reflect who we are and who we want to be in the future. In particular, I would point out that we updated our equity value statement to more clearly reflect assessment of our impacts on our employees, our riders, and the communities we serve. And we added, we're very excited about this, a new culture value statement that centers people and the well-being and safety of those people at the center of what we do. Next slide. So these are the 8 high-level goals that we have set as an agency to guide our work going forward. These goals were developed and aligned to the priorities of the Healy-Driscoll administration, our secretary, our board, the general manager, and the work of our staff. And I want to point out that very intentionally, many of these goals focus on people, not on specific projects. They center our workforce, our riders, and the communities we serve in the work that we do. And I'm not going to talk through, I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I want to just tell you a little bit about each of them to guide our discussion. I'm going to just tell you about the rationale for each of them. So the first goal focuses on developing our safety culture at the T. The second focuses on the need to modernize our system and improve connectivity, as well as bring our assets to a state of good repair. The third goal focuses on transparent decision-making. The fourth focuses on building and retaining a diverse workforce to help us accomplish our work. Our fifth goal recognizes the importance that frequent and reliable service play in our region. Our sixth goal highlights the importance and the need to enhance the environmental sustainability and resilience of our transit system. And the seventh is somewhat interconnected with that, focuses on growing our ridership and supporting mode shift. And finally, our eighth goal focuses on open communication about our costs and the revenue needed to support our service. Next slide. So in addition to these goals, we also developed a set of overarching metrics that are going to help us track our progress towards these goals. And these top metrics are going to enable us to report out on our implementation. And as I said earlier, to course correct if we see that we aren't making enough progress in certain areas. We will also be developing more detailed metrics that for each of the goals, but the top metrics here are going to help us to track our overall progress. Next slide. All right, so in response to those goals, we have already started to take some initial actions that were going to help us to build some momentum internally. We said we have more work to do, but we're going to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we have at least started since we rolled out these goals and gave this presentation to our board this summer. So these actions that we have taken include some key executive hires to build our team in strategic places, as well as a focus on our hiring across the entire agency. We have our team has also worked on refining CIP scoring to ensure that our CIP project selection advances the goals that we have set and reflects our values. For instance, if we say that sustainability or equity are our goals, we need to make sure that that's reflected, are our values. We need to make sure that that's reflected in how we score projects. So our team made some changes to our CIP scoring this year, and we'll be continuing to refine that as we develop our metrics and our targets. We've been working on some sustainability planning with our environmental team, focused around everything from storm response planning to how we can help meet the state's climate goals. And we are beginning to work with MassDOT on the next program for mass transportation, which will be built around our agency goals. Next slide. All right, so as a next step, we are working to understand our baseline and assessing the gaps in how our existing work plans address these new agency goals. We have a lot of work underway, but we'll be finalizing that metrics dashboard. And also we need to set targets for how much progress we can reasonably make towards each goal in a resource constrained environment. We're also going to be developing the baseline data that we track progress against. For example, conducting a staff survey to provide data on employee satisfaction, and completing a workforce assessment that will set the baseline for how many workers we need across the agency to do the work that we need to do. Next slide. And the goals and metrics we're sharing with you today are intended to help us better engage both internally with our staff and externally with stakeholders, including all of you. We said before, there's a couple of different ways that we are engaging with these goals now and into the future. So we said this before, but in a little bit more detail, these goals we are intending to use as the basis for some of our required planning activities. I mentioned before that we've built them into our scoring for our CIP. And we are also working with MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning to connect our goals into the next program for mass transportation, which many of you know the last one was Focus 40. So in this process, as I said, we did not focus on specific project selection. Should we do this project or this project? Because we felt like we needed to first zoom out and ask the why. What are we driving towards longer term in order to be able to then assess those projects? So we are working with the Office of Transportation Planning to ensure that the next program for mass transportation, which will be, I believe, will be under contract in the next fiscal year, that will provide the public process for stakeholders to weigh in on the costs and the trade-offs of specific projects based on our values, our goals, and the metrics that the T has defined. And then internally, we also have a lot more work to do with our own staff. I mentioned that we have talked to about 150 staff and gotten their input on these goals, but the MBTA is, of course, significantly larger than that. So we are doing a lot of work with our communications team about how we communicate about these goals and how they relate to all of our staff's day-to-day work. That's work that we will have ongoing for a significant amount of time to make sure that everyone across the agency knows how their work connects to these goals. Next slide. All right, so our last step is around assessing our resources and trying to understand if we have the right resources and if we've put the right plans in place to help us accomplish these goals. And to track our progress. So we are going to be developing some additional strategies and action plans to help us meet these goals. And we'll be reporting out and tracking our progress against those metrics. But we also know that because we said this is ongoing planning and that we view planning as a verb, we will be reevaluating the goals that we set, the plans that we make, and refining our strategic planning frequently to respond to changing context and needs. So I think that's all the content we had for you today, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have and also have Lindsay join me for any questions you might have for her as well.
Thank you, Laura. Questions for Laura or Lindsay? See, oh, there you go. Aaron, shoot.
Good morning, Erin Chute, Town of Brookline. Thank you very much, Laura and Lindsay, for that presentation and for the work that you do. I sort of clearly saw the rider satisfaction that you were looking at, also the employee satisfaction that you're looking at. Appreciate both of those. I heard you talk about the communities you service, but I didn't see that as clearly in the presentation, and would recommend, as you say, is this is sort of an ongoing process. It's a verb, maybe consideration of a goal that more directly relates to collaboration, transparency, accountability, and responsiveness to the communities, or specifically the cities and towns as organizations that you serve. I think this will be key to the MBTA's long-term success, and we want to support you and certainly see this as collaborative. So just something to consider. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. I do want to just make sure that you saw that one of our goals did include ensuring the experiences and the perspectives of our riders are accounted in our decision making, but happy to talk more if you have feedback.
And I just mean riders is distinct from the city
communities. Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, got
Yeah, and as Laura said, it's really lovely to be here this morning and kind of use all the different forums that we have to be thinking in this longer term way. And without a doubt, our municipal partners, you can't operate in 171 cities and towns and not know just how critically important you are. And so thinking about, I will say we tried very hard. There are lots of different sort of what should be at the center of the T and sort of like who is our most important stakeholders. You could imagine some tension we have given the vast majority of people who rightly are interested. And we really tried to put, I would say, two groups, not to say others aren't important, but our riders, which sometimes the T is, we get some negative feedback that we don't spend enough time talking about a rider and rider experience, and then our employees. And as we know over the last couple of years with COVID in particular, our challenges with our workforce, we really wanted to lift those up, not to the detriment of others, but to kind of acknowledge some deficits in the past, I would say, at least as feedback that we've received, not to rule out the importance though of the many other state level agencies, municipal level. And so I think transparency and decision making are referenced there, but I really appreciate the feedback for us to think about. That is an ongoing process that could always be improved upon. So thank you very much, Aaron, for that feedback.
Lynn Diggins.
Thank you. And it'd be even better if the employees were the riders, right? And you get a 2-for-1 in that. This is great. I mean, I really encourage. I'm happy to see you doing this. And I also just want to encourage you to encourage people to be creative. And solutions. To the issues that the team faces. I think that's probably in the leadership realm, but also encourage other levels of staff to think creatively, because sometimes that involves a level of risk that sometimes people aren't comfortable with, because creative solutions or attempts to get creative solutions have maybe a higher risk factor in them. But you gotta take chances, I think, sometimes to come up with really interesting solutions. And I also want to encourage you to think further ahead. I heard that too. But think about what we want transit and transportation to be 30, 40 years out, instead of letting it happen to us. I know we often feel that, how dare us think that we can control the future, but we can't necessarily control it, but we can plan for what we want. And then as things change, it fits into a framework that we have in mind, and we can help bend the forces that occur in the future towards what we want. So, but this is great. I encourage you. I'm happy to see it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Len. And I will just say, this strategic planning work is part of us trying to think further ahead. And we are an operating agency. Many of our staff are focused on what is happening today, what is happening tomorrow, what emergency has come up. But our team is very focused on building the connection to our long-range plans, to the plans that you all are engaged in, and to making sure that we as an agency are able to look up and think forward a little bit more.
General.
Thank you. Without adding too much to what Len said, I also just wanted to really appreciate the long-term vision here. It's really great to see this, happening alongside, of course, the many initiatives the T is taking on a more immediate basis. We would love to be able to kind of support and cheerlead that the efforts to kind of do both of these alongside each other. And so really appreciate to see the kind of what's already taken place and the kind of plans for next steps there too.
David, can I just respond real quick to the last couple of comments? And I think they are really important. I think what we are seeing under General Manager Eng's leadership is an attempt to try to do some things differently. And this is we often hear people want us to do things differently. When we try to, it can be hard. And we do all see that. We've all experienced it in our own professional lives, certainly. But whether it's the transparency around the track improvement plan and saying we're going to do something big and bold and people aren't going to like it, and but we're still going to try to move that forward to, frankly, I think if we all collectively, you know, the T is going to come forward with some targets and some metrics, and hopefully through the next PMT, we can be doing a lot more community engagement about if those are the right ones or not the right ones, how we need support to make those happen, whether to Aaron's point at the municipal level, whether financially the support to see some of these things through, but also to just realize that those 8 big goals, they're lofty and they're wonderful, and they live in tension with each other because making a system fully accessible is absolutely a goal of the T. I think there's a right question for us to ask: by when and how quickly? And what if we also need to build up all of the resiliency things that we need to do? And we also have to balance the need and the pressures around system expansion. And we have to get a workforce that wants to stay here and be here. And so we are trying to kind of, I think, set up a bigger conversation about what does everyone want from the T, recognizing this is not there's not a fully consensus-based decision-making process. We all have different views on that, but trying to give us a framework in which to do it. And then there's a different matter around execution and sort of both and, right, Jen? If we're not working well with you and all of your colleagues at the city, whether it's a near term, you know, bus stops or a closure, and longer term, Rutherford Ave and Center Line bus lanes. Like I heard Yasha say, the T has a hard time thinking longer term. We're trying to build that muscle, and it's fair, totally fair. We're trying to build that muscle and be better at it so we can also be better partners for all of you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Laura. Excellent presentation. Next item on the agenda is a presentation from, I believe, Ken Miller of the Federal Highway Administration on federal grants awarded to the Boston region. Ken, whenever you're ready.
Right, thank you, David. And I think Brandon from FTA is also going to be talking about what FTA is up to with these discretion.
Whenever you and Brandon are ready.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Just very briefly, good morning, everyone, again. Bipartisan infrastructure law, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was signed by President Biden just a little over 2 years ago. Next slide, please. What does that mean for generally? It's a huge increase in highway funding across the nation. And remember, highway funding is not just roads and bridges. It means bike paths. It means EV charging, just everything under the sun. A dozen new highway programs, some of which are discretionary. But the bottom line there is that there are more opportunities for local governments and other non-traditional entities to access funding directly. Next slide, please. So what does that mean for Massachusetts? Well, it's over 5 years, it's an increase of about 50% in highway funding, over $1 billion a year. That's an increase of about $650 million in existing and new formula programs. That formula programs are those funding that's allocated to the state and then sub-allocated to the MPOs, a portion of which is sub-allocated to the MPOs. That's what you see in your regional targets for each MPO. But there's also a $1.3 billion new supplemental formula programs, which MassDOT has received over 5 years, about $1.2 billion in new bridge programs, $60 million in electric vehicle infrastructure, and other things. Next slide, please. So there are lots of new discretionary programs. There are about 40 in total. This chart does not show all of them, but where you see the highlighted blue check mark, those are programs that municipalities, MPOs, tribes, other public authorities can apply directly to and get an award. And it's a competitive process. And if you are awarded, you can, in most cases, you can choose to receive the funds directly from Federal Highway or work through MassDOT and be a sub-recipient through MassDOT. The only exception there is the Safe Streets and Roads program. Since the state is not an eligible recipient, we cannot transfer funds through MassDOT for those for that particular program. Next slide, please. So for any municipality or any other entity, to find out if you're eligible for any one of these things, or to find out when typically the way it works is a notice of funding opportunity that's released every year through the Federal Register. To find out what's going on, just go on our website, transportation.gov, or next slide, please. And then for any particular program, it will tell you who's eligible and what you need to do to apply. So what has happened so far in the first 2 years? Next slide, please. So far in Massachusetts, we've actually, there have been a total of 33 discretionary grant awards, totaling $80 million or so of federal funding, of which 11 shown here, are in the Boston region. I think that's a total of about $24 million. Just very briefly, ATTAIN is Advanced Transportation Technology and Innovation. RCP is Reconnecting Communities. SMART is Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation. I'm not sure who comes up with all these acronyms. And obviously, Safe Streets for All is the bulk of the grant awards, of which the Boston MPO has gotten over $2 million award to develop the safety action plan, which you heard about at our last MPO meeting. Next slide, please. So the way, if you are the recipient of an award, as I mentioned, you can either, in most cases, you can choose to work directly with Federal Highway, or you can contract through MassDOT. Next slide, please. But federal requirements do apply. So just remember, most programs have matching funds, not all. The project has to be programmed. You have to go through NEPA, all that good stuff. Davis-Bacon, Buy America, Brooks Act, Civil Rights Act, ADA, all apply generally to most of these projects if you do get an award. Next slide, please. So there are plenty of resources. You can start with transportation.gov. You can go to Federal Highway website. You can just find there's a lot of information about any of these things, and you can get on mailing lists so that when there's a new notice of funding opportunity, you can get notified directly through us. And with that, I don't know if I should take questions or I should turn it over to Brandon. Do you want to go ahead, Brandon?
Why don't you turn it over to Brandon and we'll take questions at the end.
Sounds good. Hey, well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so I'm going to have a brief overview of discretionary awards through the Federal Transit Administration. Eric Rapetti, he's our director for the Office of Planning and Program Development. He had a conference today, so I'm filling in for him. So next slide, please. So as Ken mentioned, the bipartisan infrastructure law that increased our federal funding, even on the transit side, about 40% for our formula funding. And it also opened up additional discretionary opportunities. So to start things off, I'm going to discuss the community project funding. The community project funding is also congressionally directed spending. These were previously known as earmarks, and these came back under the bipartisan infrastructure law. So as you can see, the Boston area has had some success. The city of Salem in 2023, they received $2.3 million for a North Shore Workforce Career Mobility Program. They also received some of these CPF funding for South Salem Commuter Rail Stop study. MBTA also received $7 million for the Newton Commuter Rail Station accessibility improvements. And MassDOT received some funding for the planning study with the Wonderland Multimodal Connector. See, next slide, please. So the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. This is called RAISE. Previously, this was known as BUILD or TIGER. This also has brought some additional funding under bill to the region. 2021, Blue Hill Ave received $15 million. MassDOT received in 2022 $15 million for the Linway Multimodal Corridor. And in 2022, the city of Boston received the Roxbury Resilient Transportation Corridor. This opportunity is also currently, there's a notice of funding opportunity that's available. That'll be available until February 28th of 2024. So this is a popular program, and it helps communities around the country carry out projects with significant local or regional impact. And as you can see, the region has had success in the past. Next slide, please. So these are some of our other discretionary programs. FTA has numerous programs. We have a passenger ferry program, which the MBTA had some success in 2022 for the Hingham Ferry dock modifications. Additionally, we have the All Stations Accessibility Program, and in 2022, Symphony Station was selected to receive $66 million to make the station accessible. We also are one of our bigger programs is the Bus and Low-No programs. I think there's about $1.7 million annually that goes out to bus providers. And in 2021, MBTA received $5 million for the Quincy Bus Maintenance Facility, and in 2022, they received $116 million to replace their vehicles with battery electric buses. Additionally, MassDOT received some funding in 2022 for some hybrid vehicles. And lastly, we have a transit-oriented development program. It's a pilot program, planning program, and Red Line received some of this funding in 2022. So there's various programs out there. I'm happy to take any questions, or feel free to contact me. I can throw my information in the chat. Also, the All Stations Accessibility Program, that is currently active. So if you have any interest in applying there, I don't think they did it in 23, but 24 now it's active. So feel free to reach out to the region and myself. So, thanks,
you,
Ken.
Brandon. Thank you, Ken. Any questions for Brandon or Ken? Seeing none. Thank you, gentlemen. Next item on the agenda is a method to evaluate flexible bus routing opportunities. Stephen Andrews.
Thank you very much. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So hello, my name is Stephen Andrews. Today I'll be presenting the initial outcomes from our discrete study exploring the development of methodology to evaluate flexible bus service opportunities, which we initially presented at the August 3rd MPO meeting. Next slide. As I think we're generally aware, flexible bus service could take many forms, from door to door, zone to zone, flag stops. And what we're exploring here, kind of a route deviation service. These flexible services could offer greater coverage than a fixed route service, especially those with mobility challenges. During the initial MPO meeting, we described that our main objective of this work was going to be focusing on exploring and taking the initial steps towards building a methodology to answer questions about whether a bus service ought to change its operating mode, operating characteristics. We did just that. We built a methodology using 2 RTA bus routes serving the MPO. So today I'll present our thinking behind the methodology itself, briefly review what it looks like in practice, and then I'm going to end with some breadcrumbs for us for the future. Next slide, please. So our logic was that a flexible service needs people who are making trips outside the route's core service area, that area directly adjacent to a route. So it's the area outside that area. But there can't be too much demand outside that core service area, because the core service is going to degrade too much if a bus is diverting all the time. So there's some Goldilocks zone between those 2 points where like this obviously doesn't make sense, or this obviously doesn't make sense. There's a place in between there that maybe this makes sense. And as a third piece, we wanted to not just check for really high demand outside the core service area in one place. We want to look at it across the entire route, giving a nod to the fact that demand varies across the route. Next slide, please. So let's jump into the methodology itself. We followed 4 general steps. We created a special representation or abstraction of the route. We identified travel patterns for people who are making trips in those areas using a brand new data set from Replica. We evaluate those demand patterns, and we finally perform an analysis of whether to continue in a more detailed fashion with a closer look. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take each of those 4 steps and break them down a little bit. There's more detail here than what I'm going to say today. If we're interested in more discussion, let's do it. We've sectioned this bus route into a series of groups that go along the bus route. And those groups are composed of individual cells. And each one of these groups represents a decision point about whether the bus might divert from its fixed route service to go serve an on-demand trip to the left or right of a bus route. Because these cells are similarly sized across the route, we could evaluate whether a specific population, a vulnerable population, a target population, people with mobility challenges, a population that we could define, might be better served by going to the left or to the right to serve them. And as you move along the route, you're passing into a new decision point. So what we're trying to do then is eventually trying to figure out how many times to those decision points do we say, maybe it's worthwhile to go to divert. Next slide, please. So this is the same bus route. Now these dots represent people making trips inside of our cells. So we use a brand new data source available to us, courtesy of our partners at MassDOT, to quantify demand within each cell. This data source comes from Replica, which is a data provider that creates a synthetic population based on location-based services, census data, spending data, land use data on the built environment, and its ground truth as well. So this data set provides really detailed data about synthetic individuals, their households, and their trips. This lets us do things that we really couldn't do with census data. So now we can identify people who meet multiple criteria and travel within our service area. So we could use household characteristics, for example, people who don't use transit, but maybe a member of their family does. We could find people who meet multiple criteria. The census just doesn't tell us that. It tells us about people with mobility challenges, but not people with mobility challenges who also are using services in this area. We used 5 criteria. Thank you. We used 5 criteria for our analysis. We used older folks who are age 75 years or older, people who are lower income, which matches the MPO's definition. We have 0 vehicle households. We have people who live in households where somebody uses transit with the idea that they could talk to one another and navigate a transit system. And then we also identified people who are making healthcare trip purposes, which is just a way to acknowledge that that is a very important trip for this style of this population. Next slide, please. So using these travel patterns, we can then evaluate the relative demand across the route. In that top example, those purple cells indicate that the core of the route was really strong. This might suggest that you're doing an okay job with your route as is. The second one shows that there's kind of a mismatch between your target population and your actual route, which might suggest you should just create a different fixed route service or modify the existing fixed route service. And then that last one, where there's some demand, that's what we're really looking for here, that it doesn't really warrant a full reworking of the route, There are some places where this makes sense, that's where we're truly trying to explore. Next slide, please. We count the number of times that those outer cells are the most high in demand cells, and we put them on this scale that we've created. This scale is just an embodiment of that logic we put before, where if there's not any of these cells, it's probably not worthwhile. If it's every single cell, it's probably not going to be a great service either. With the idea that fewer cells is probably the right place than more cells. So we have ideas on how to improve this scale using real world routes, real world flexible services that currently exist in Eastern Massachusetts. So interesting scale. We have ideas on how to refine that methodology. In this case, if we kind of hit that, consider this further, I think that's the point where you get to, you should go look at, what's happening in these cells. Is there opportunity to survey people? Is there opportunity to do a variation of the bus route where it just goes to some sort of center, a community center, or do you need a demand, a flexible service instead? Next slide, please. So we developed this methodology on two bus routes, Lowell's Route 13 and Brockton Area Transit's Route 12. These routes were mostly straight with a few deviations. They provide enough challenges that we had to figure things out. We've communicated with staff at both of these agencies. We sent our memo to them in advance of this meeting in case they wanted to get in touch with us. Today, we're going to present BAT Route 12. It's a longer inner city bus route that provides relatively frequent service between Brockton and Ashmont Station in Boston. We chose this route because it serves a considerably larger number of MPO communities than Lowell Route 12, which serves many hundred feet of MPO service area. So we followed our 4 steps. We turned the bus route into, we abstracted that bus route, we calculated demand, we evaluated whether those flanking cells were more popular or not. Next slide. We counted them up, and then we put them on a scale. So I'm not going to say that because this scale that I created, it's close to where I created it, BAT should run out and go do a route deviation service. It's more that this would be a good opportunity for BAT to go explore those cells in more detail and kind of go into the next step of how does this affect the current service. Next slide, please. So I think we have kind of 2 different ways we could take this work from here. We could do both. They don't have to be either or. We could either refine the current work, which is building more automation, building a front end so a planner could just select a route from a dropdown and it builds it and reports back to them. There's plenty of refinement to do in the methodology itself. We have the opportunities to review current implementations in Eastern Massachusetts to enhance our methods. And then we have lots of testing to do. We could test on, we tested on 2 bus routes. There's many bus routes in Eastern Massachusetts that we could certainly test this on, from the RTAs, the MBTA, TMAs, municipal, straight, circuitous. There's all sorts of routes out there that we could test this out on and see if it's appropriate. And then next slide, please. I'll also add, we could also add new data sets. Sorry about that. So we could also extend this work by zooming out, kind of a higher level regional perspective that tries to identify what types of transit makes sense in which types of areas based on the characteristics of those areas. We have tools available to us now through the census always. We have the replica data set. We have our Conveyal opportunity platform that measures access to opportunities. And combine these tools may give us a good sense of what types of services make sense in which areas. So it's a zoomed out perspective from what we did here. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions from the board.
Thanks, Stephen. Questions for Stephen? So Stephen, I've got one.
Absolutely.
I know you reached out to BAT and I assume to Lowell Transit. So
Yes.
it seems to me to answer your question about future work and where do you go, what should we be doing? I think you need to do more of that outreach, right? To both, to the T, as you said, to the T, to, Express, to whoever else operates service, to figure out whether they value what you're doing. I think it's wonderful. Okay, I actually think it's really interesting, and I think it's a great use of data sets that we now have. But I think it would be a good idea for you and your staff to reach out to them and ask them these questions, and then come back to us and ask us these questions again based on the information you get from them. Because I think it's great work. I find it very interesting, but I don't want you to do it if it's great work that's not going to result in an action, right? So I would just say I think you should do more outreach to the actual operators to see what they would like, and then come back to us and see what we can afford to do.
I think that's a wonderful observation, and absolutely that's a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Zillions of questions and comments, Mr. Andrews. So I'm going to ask you, to come to advisory council meeting sometime soon. But a couple of them now. Well, first off, I'm really interested in the flag stop aspect of this. And so if we're exploring more, I'd like to see us explore that. And so my other question is, would you recommend that we put this in the universe for the PWP, like another phase of this, and or do you feel that we should not go for this year's universe, but maybe wait until the next cycle? No comment. That's fine.
I have no comment on that.
Okay,
I don't know. I don't know the schedules well enough to comment on timelines.
Okay.
It's certainly interesting work, but with what David just suggested, I think doing more.
We should let Stephen talk to Tegan about that before anybody answers it in public.
Yeah, well, the reason I asked is that with the parking study, the municipal parking study, we had phase 2 of that the following year, and there's my question was is staff really keyed up now, and it's more efficient to continue that work, and the next year than to maybe put it on hold for following year. So that was the context for that, but I didn't mean to put you in an awkward position, Stephen. So just one kind of curiosity question now, though. So how would we determine when people want to get picked up at a stop that's not on the fixed route? And where do they want to get picked up?
I mean, I think the current strategy for a lot of organizations is calling in advance.
Okay, fine. All right, that's what I thought.
So I think that's one of the questions that the operators would have to deal with. Do you want to set up a system to get phone calls from individuals, or have an app that does it for you? That's a conversation with the operators themselves on how they want to administer such a service.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but I was just wondering if there's something else. All right, well, thank you, and hopefully we'll see you at an advisory council meeting. Thank you again.
Happy to attend.
Good.
I just wanted to, clarify the additional work that's needed. Is that additional funding that's needed to do that, or is there anything left as part of the funding so far?
So from a funding perspective, I think that we did not spend exactly all of the money that we requested the first time, but there's, that pot of money, as I understand it, ends at some point, and then a new one starts. So essentially, I believe the answer is it would need new money, new resources for sure. And what is left is not enough resources to do much in this vein.
General.
Chair, and thank you, Stephen. This was really really interesting for me to read. I thought you did a fantastic job, both in the presentation and in the memo, conveying a very complex analysis in a way that was approachable. I guess kind of question and also a bit of a teaser for the next week's TIP process engagement and readiness committee is I know we're going to be hearing update from Ethan and folks in Newton about micro transit projects in the that we funded in the TIP that are more of the demand response type service. And I was curious if if folks there might be interested in, I know this is a different type of service in this work, and then also my understanding is that there's been challenges around cost effectiveness of the demand response type service. Are there ways of layering on a cost effectiveness analysis onto the type of work you did that would kind of help us understand the range of different types of deviations from fixed route service and what might be the happy Goldilocks type of service that you referred to?
The work we did in this was, I think it does a fairly good job of examining demand for a service. And there's if you look at it just the right way, there's a hint at the cost effectiveness in that there's a hint of it there if you look at it in just the right way. But that is a place where if we really wanted to extend this, there's a lot of work you could do on the cost effectiveness piece of it it would be an extension, and it would need some thought about how to actually implement such a thing. It's actually a lot more complicated than counting people and their trips, which I think we've seen it before. And then I think on that greater regional look, that would tell you some amount of, here's the quantity of trips, what is the level of service needed, what does that level of service cost, and maybe that starts hinting at it at a more regionally appropriate level. The specific service itself level, again, like that's really challenging, I think. So it's challenging, Jen. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Stephen. Susan Barrett, who operates the Express, you want to give us a comment?
Yeah, I had a question. And I guess it's somewhat similar to Jen's. We just saw a presentation from at the Transit Working Group meeting that MassDOT is looking at sort of mapping out all the services across the Commonwealth. And I was wondering, do you see this study factoring into that or overlaying on that one, to really say like, well, this is where we would recommend you add more fixed route or more flexible route or, or another service like just purely demand responsive?
So, Stephen, let me go first because I think it's also a question for MassDOT. So I think the answer is not yet for MassDOT services, right? I mean, part of this is Stephen and his team have done this on two routes. We'd have to figure out whether, as an MPO, whether it makes sense for him to do it on additional routes, and if so, what routes would those be? And then at some point, yes, the MPO's work and MassDOT's work should somehow meld together to provide benefit to the providers. Stephen?
I was going to say the exact same thing with the same words.
Excellent.
So,
any other questions?
I want to say, Susan operates. You're from Lex Express, who essentially you take phone calls for people who want to do light route deviation. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're primarily fixed route, though it's been a flag stop since it originated in 1979. We don't do many deviations, but we will do them. Basically, how we make our decisions is there some other option someone can use? Because sometimes people will call us and they want to take the Express, but really they've got the MBTA right there. So we're not going to then deviate for them and go way out of our way to do that. It also has to be something that we can get in and out of, get to an area in and out of without really making the trip worse for the other people that could be, riding. So that's really how we're doing it. It's a relatively small number of people, but there's definitely places where we're seeing by getting these calls, it's actually valuable because now we're seeing like, oh, more people want to go to this one area. So now we're trying to factor that into kind of future planning to see if we can better connect that way. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
thanks for that.
Thank you, Stephen. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
And now I believe we are at the point where we can ask for member items. Anybody have any items today?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just couldn't get my hand up fast enough, So I just wanted to invite everyone to come to our meeting on next Wednesday. As I said, it's a workshop meeting, and the more people there, I mean, the better. I mean, and we consider ourselves an extension of this board in these kinds of meetings. It's another way for you to give your input. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other member items? Seeing none, as Tegan mentioned, we will be meeting on the 21st, so mark your calendar. We may not meet on the 4th, but we will officially let you know. And on that, can I get a motion in a second to adjourn this meeting? Please state your name for the record and making the motion. Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, and I will motion to adjourn this meeting.
Is there a second?
Diggin seconds.
Motion has been made and seconded. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye, guys. See you in a couple weeks.